Every day, new technologies shape our lives without us even knowing. How do these forces affect the livelihoods of everyday people? What can we learn from their interaction at a global scale? And most importantly, how can we harness these to be a force for good? In this episode, I'll be focusing on these themes while discussing ex-Verizon Senior Staff turned Professor Mike Driscoll's career in technology. Spending nearly 30 years at Verizon and now Professor of Business and Technology Management at NYU Tandon, Mike brings a world of experience from the past and present of innovation. Tonight, prepare to see its future. And tonight, I'd like to welcome Mike Driscoll. How you been, Mike? You doing well?
Good, Frank. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and it's honestly a real honor to have you here. I've had a wonderful time getting to know you over the years, and I really want to just open out with a kind of just right out of the box kind of question. How did you end up at Verizon? What kind of was your story, and how did you end up moving to that place?
All right, Frank. It's not much of a story, but I had graduated from high school in June, as most of us do, graduate in June. And college wasn't really going to be part of my next steps. Just, family reasons. I come from a large family, the oldest of five, etc. So I was reading the paper on Sunday, pretty much after graduation, high school graduation. I was working in a ShopRite supermarket, during high school and everything. And there was an ad, New York Telephone, looking for telephone operators. So it was you apply in person in White Plains, New York. So I went down to White Plains, 10 County Center Road, and I applied. And about 2 weeks later, I got a call to take a test. And I started July 13th, 1987. So 32 years ago, about 2 weeks ago. So that's really the story of how I ended up in what is now called Verizon. But I started with New York Telephone, and New York Telephone. Just a little history. Back in 1986, there was a ruling. And it's similar now. AT&T was declared a monopoly. MCI was a telco company that was trying to get into the long distance business, and Judge Hal Green at the federal level, not the Supreme Court, but he ruled that AT&T was a monopoly, and they had to break up. So New York Telephone had to take back their local traffic, all what we call the baby bells. And that's how I was hired, because there was a great need now to hire for New York Telephone, New England Telephone, Bell of Pennsylvania, Chesapeake and Potomac, Southwestern Bell, etc., all the baby bells. And that's how I was hired. Ironically, again, throughout the years, what happened was New York Telephone merged with New England Telephone, and they became 9X. And then down, in Philadelphia and Virginia, Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, all the Bell systems combined into Bell Atlantic. Then 9X merged with Bell Atlantic, which became Bell Atlantic. And then Bell Atlantic merged with GTE, and we became Verizon. So it kind of went full circle. But that's how I just read an ad in the paper. They were looking for telephone operators, and I started as a telephone operator, 411. Now nobody really dials 411 anymore. It's still around, but it was completely disrupted by smartphones and search. But that's how I started in July 13th, 1987.
Well, it's from small beginnings come great results. So, I think it's really amazing to have you start from this really entry-level position, really just grow from there. And what was it like just having the company remerge with other parts of itself? How did you how were you treated in those situations? How did your position change? How did your role change as being someone who had been with New York Telephone for as long as you were?
Yeah, so I began with New York Telephone, and actually, basically, like 1989, it became 9X, right around 1990, and the mergers, happen, quite often. I think it's been Verizon now, probably for at least, let's see, the GT merger, probably 15 years. So the mergers came fast, and what happened was, I began as a call center operator, telephone operator, and I had really nice managers who were willing to promote me and give me opportunities. And so I went into the management role. And for example, in New York Telephone, I had, responsibility, for New York itself. So, seriously, we had an office in Southampton on 55 Windmill Road. The building's still there, but we had a call center there all the way up to Buffalo. And so I was involved as a manager from Southampton up to Buffalo. And then when we merged with New England Telephone, my responsibilities travel-wise and just work-wise became from Bangor, Maine, all the way, again to Buffalo, for example, or down to Olean, New York, which is near the Pennsylvania border. So just with every merger, just that your scope of responsibility and your scope of territory expanded.
How are the travel expenses?
I really racked up the travel. I'm a lifetime platinum Marriott member, and it was just part of the business. So I traveled almost anywhere in, up and down the East Coast. I've been, all through Maine, up, down through West Virginia. I've pretty much been everywhere on the East Coast.
Wow, that's amazing experience. I've only personally been down to Florida and up to Vermont, and that's about the range of where I've been. What would you say was your favorite part of the East Coast?
Favorite part. There were so many, going through, I actually was in West Virginia and had to go to West Virginia. And I traveled with basically one or two other folks. So I always had, two other people with me just because we had different responsibilities, and it would save, when we were doing projects or cutovers. So the three of us actually left West Virginia. We were in Clarksburg, West Virginia, and we had to go to Richmond, and we went through the Shenandoah Mountains, and it was just absolutely amazing. The beauty of that. And so we always, tried to take in the scene. So I would say the Shenandoah Mountains were the highlight of that.
Wow, I honestly have never been, and it sounds like it was a really beautiful place. And during your travels, did you ever run into any kind of characters that might be a little bit different, that are story
I just met, it's wonderful, the diversity. People in Maine, people in West Virginia, I'm a New Yorker, even like upstate New York, Buffalo, down to Long Island, there's always different accents, dialects. People can tell that you're from New York, when I was, working in West Virginia. But it was just so nice to take in the different cultures and the different diversity of all the places. It was always nice to learn about the different areas and the different cultures.
And on the topic of learning, like how much did you have to learn when you swapped from your originally being like a call operator to now being a manager? What was the learning like for that?
Well, what happened? So I was a telephone operator, and again, I was very fortunate. I part of it is on you, and part of it is your managers, and it was really coming in on time, showing up. What we would call plug in to the board, which was the computer at the time, and be nice to the customers. I was customer facing, so we would do approximately 800 to 1,000 calls a day. So I was touching 800 to 1,000 customers a day looking for information. So I was trying to satisfy on average 1,000 customers a day, and that was their impression of New York Telephone. And they would observe you. They would, they would observe your calls like live. The managers would, remotely observe you to make sure you were doing the right thing. And so I was given an opportunity by the call center manager. Her name is Annette Gasparo. And she said, would you like to go down to work in Manhattan? I was actually in Peekskill, New York, working, and I said sure. So I was able to go down to 38th Street, 240 East 38th Street, as an acting manager. So what they do in the what they do, still do in Verizon, is that they make you an acting manager. You're on probation, and they make sure that you can do the job and you can manage people correctly, etc. So that, I was managing people, managing projects, traveling, and also this is where the education came in. Also, I only had a high school degree, and if I wanted to go further in the company, I needed a associate's or bachelor's, etc. So I went to school at night to first get my bachelor's degree.
Just to first touch on this growth experience as a manager, being able to really see the company on a lot of different levels, what would you say were the key personality traits that allowed you to really succeed in the role you had been offered the chance to pursue?
It's a cliche, but you have 2 ears and one mouth. And I was young at the time. I was in my early 20s. And I kept my mouth shut and my ears open. And I listened to the people that, the folks that were there for 20, 25 years, and I can name them all. And, they would call me the kid. And I just was positive and, really just kept my mouth shut and listened and learned. That was the key attribute, just to learn and just be respectful to those people ahead of you. And that's what I did. I was always positive, willing to learn, I never complained. The hours were, some days we would work like a 7 to 3 tour, and the other days we would even work overnights, a lot of overnights. So you just kept positive.
Right. So you would say that it's definitely listening and always keeping a positive attitude. And I think that holds true for a lot of things, and especially just being able to do the customer service side of things, which is really quite difficult. And it just plays very well in being a manager. You got to keep your team motivated. And I want to actually jump on to your movement from a call operator to manager. What was that jump like for you? What was the kind of culture shift, so to speak?
Well, in terms of culture, the culture at Verizon has always, stayed the same, for even the last 30 years. It's always about accountability, integrity, respect, and performance excellence. And that's been ingrained from 1987, up to now. When I retired from Verizon, that was always the culture. So it was more of like I was a single contributor as a telephone operator. Again, I had customers. It was my responsibility. Then when you went into management, you had the responsibility for a team of people. So you still had to focus on the customer, but it was more of managing people now. That was the big difference. But in terms of the culture, it was always accountability, integrity, respect, and performance excellence.
Okay. And more so, like, how did your relationship shift with the people who worked with you before? You were originally the kid, but now you're this manager of the people who you worked with. What was that like for you?
It was good. I was managing people older than me, and you have to earn their respect. And the way I did it was to be hands-on. I would work holidays with them. If there was if there was work going on during the overnight, I showed up. I was really with my team, and that really gives you a lot of respect. Holidays, especially, if people, we were 24/7, 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year operation. And the people who are working holidays, go in to the office and visit or call them. Say, hey, I just wanted to, wish happy Thanksgiving. How's everything going today, etc. It's that personal touch to let them know that you do care and that you're part of the teams, especially like the overnights. I could have stopped doing overnight work, etc. But if my team is there, I'm going to follow them. So that's how, that's the respect. Quite candidly, I saw some folks come in who were like, I'm the manager, listen to me, etc. It's more of a servant leadership. There goes my team, I better follow them.
So you're a boss or you're a leader. And you were definitely of the leader category, being someone who brings your team with you, doesn't just go forward and drag your team along. And I think that's something that's really important for people to understand just in any situation. And now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and ask you just, What was it like going to night school for college as well as working this managerial job? What was that kind of dynamic like for you?
It was challenging. You really have to have the support of family, spouse. Um, it's what I would call short-term sacrifice, long-term gain. And I wasn't the only one doing it. I have, classmates who I went to school with, and so you have to have that support group also. You're not alone in that. There were a bunch of us going to school at night, whether it was Verizon or IBM or Con Ed or City of New York. You were all in it together and you all helped each other. But yeah, I went to school night, weekends, a lot of weekends. I was very fortunate to go to what we call weekend college. So it was like Friday nights, all day Saturday, and all day Sunday. Every other weekend, that's how I did my bachelor's. So I was fortunate to have that weekend college available, that Fordham made available.
And what did you study there?
My undergrad, my bachelor's of arts I was a double major in economics and finance, but the economics chairperson, Andrea Scott Rahm, long retired. These folks are long retired. She called me and she said, "Could I please, graduate with the BA in economics rather than a BS in finance?" I think she was looking for the numbers, and I absolutely agreed because all I needed was a piece of paper to get to the next level. If you wanted to be promoted in Verizon, and again, you want to be promoted, there's minimum requirements. So I started as a first level manager. To get to the second level, you needed a bachelor's degree. So I just needed that piece of paper that said, yeah, I've accomplished this. I do have a bachelor's degree. And they paid for everything. They paid for 100% of my tuition. So that started my bachelor journey. And then I went on. I took a break, and then I shopped around to find out the best fit for a master's program, my MS. And I was lucky to find Polytechnic University, which is now called New York University Tandon School of Engineering. But Brooklyn Poly had a program where you would go on Thursday nights and all day Saturday. And that's how I received my master's in technology management. And then I took a little break, and then I did the same thing with my MBA, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. My MBA, the concentration is in technology management and innovation. But I did all three degrees. I got my MBA in 2010, earned my MBA in 2010. Verizon paid 100% of it. And that's one of the perks. They'll pay for anyone. They'll pay any tuition reimbursement. You just had to do it out of hours. So you couldn't, I couldn't go to school during the day. I had to make sure I went nights and weekends.
Congratulations to you, first of all, to be able to do that. It's not an easy feat. And I'd also like to ask you, what was it like in the interim between your getting your bachelor's and getting your master's? Did you feel you learned more maybe technological skills in that interim? Like what was your life like after you'd gotten a quote unquote break from having a education alongside a job? What was that interim period like for you?
Well, when I graduated with my bachelor's, it was 128 credits, and I needed a break. I needed some me time. I needed some family time. So I made sure to take care of that. And then, I received more and more responsibility at work. And again, in parallel, the phone company was expanding, technology was expanding in terms of, New York Tel 9X, Bell Atlantic. So my, again, responsibilities expanded accordingly. Instead of covering, for example, 24 switch networks in New York and New England, there were another 28, Pennsylvania, Maryland, DC, Virginia, and West Virginia. And then when we merged with GTE, it was Texas, California, and Florida. So again, it was, I had my weekends free. I had my weekends free. And then I said, all right, I probably took 4 years off before I had my MS, and then took probably another 4 years off before I got my bachelor's. But it took me, oh my goodness, it took me 9 years to get my bachelor's. The 128 credits was real rough. And then a master's at MS is only 36 credits. And then the MBA was, I think, 54 credits, but I was able to transfer like 12 credits from my MS into my MBA. So that made it, a little less credits to take. But the bachelor's, the 128 credits was the toughest part. Then doing 36 and basically another 36 for an MBA was pretty a lot less intense for me.
Over the course of your kind of education or formal education, what would you say were the main things you really learned about? Like you said, you did economics and you also studied finance while you were there. And you also then moved on to do technology management and innovation. What would you say were the general topics covered in each of the curriculums? What would you say was the things that really resonated with you?
Well, in undergrad, it's basically the core. I had to take all the core. As it exists today, your sciences, your languages, philosophy, history. So I was really glad to get that educational foundation in terms of my undergraduate degree, and learn those, all about the what we would call the core courses. And then with my MS in technology management, that's where I really started understanding the trends and understanding how to manage technology and emerging technology. And then the MBA was a little parallel, a little bit more intense on those subjects, a deeper dive into global innovation and how to manage a global team. So that was really the three pillars of my educational experience.
I see. On the topic of just this innovation and the world changing and improving technology that you studied, how did Verizon improve its technology? Like, how did its technology change over the years?
Oh, sure. So, I actually started in the call center, and it was paper records. Like, it was if you were absent, you drew a red line on this sheet. It was called an E199 sheet. And then I was fortunate to when I became a manager to work on actually the computer systems that we first implemented, and that was on modems. So I knew how to do modems and configure modems. And then we went from modems to Wellfleet routers, and from Wellfleet routers, we went to Cisco routers. So I was at a young age able to grow up with that technology, how the technology transitioned from basically paper to modems to routers, and the different protocols, SIP protocol, for example. In terms of the overall company, well, Verizon's not perfect, but there's a reason, and I'll give you a comparison quite candidly. Verizon's okay. The stock price is good, gives good dividends, because Verizon, the leadership understands what's next. How do you create the future? So I transitioned from a wireline company, copper payphones, coin phones. Coin phones were a multi-million-dollar business. I mean, if you were a coin collector, you were making, again, back in 1987, 88, 89, the ones who would empty out the coins in the coin phones, they were making six figures. They were making over $100,000. And there was a huge department. And then again, technology came, wireless smartphones, or not even smartphones, flip phone, wireless phones. And next thing you know, there was no need for the coin phone. So Verizon, if you were a coin collector and didn't transition to the new technology, well, you were out of a job. So Verizon has always been able to position itself according to the technology. There's been some bumps in the road, but the transition, again, when I started, it was 100% wireline revenue. And then, when we did wireless, it changed to now where it's 85%, probably 87% wireless revenue, down to 15-12% now wireline, and so that's the transition that Verizon has made with the technology. And now the next step, they're all in on 5G wireless. That's going to be the next thing. Whereas AT&T, they're doing 5G, but they're also content. Time Warner, they're more content also. Verizon chose not to be a content provider. They want to be the transmission for that content. And I'll give you a kind of a bad example. Frontier Telecommunications, the old Rochester Tel, they never changed to wireless. Their whole business model has been landline. And as a result, right now, their stock price today is $1.31. And we actually sold the wireline business in Florida, Texas, and California to them. And it really hasn't been a good it hasn't been a good stay at Frontier. A lot of people have been laid off. And again, a stock price of $1.31 versus a stock price today of Verizon of $57.08. There's a big difference. So I was very fortunate to have leadership who understood the technology trends and how to get in front of it and how to, capitalize on it.
On the topic of technology and just trends, what do you see are going to be the most valuable technical skills during 2019 and really kind of moving forward in this next 5-year window?
Well, you have to understand the trends. You have to understand what's coming, and you play a role in it, whether it's a project manager, whether it's a data analyst, whether you're a programmer, a coder. There's always going to be a place for you as long as you have an understanding of the technology. For example, and has some grasp of it. Like, for example, we have the autonomous things, self-driving cars. We're going to have drone deliveries. UPS announced it last week that they're going to start doing drone deliveries. Robotics, again, in like Amazon in distribution centers, a lot of robotics. So you have to understand where the trend is and how to, again, get in front of it. Again, the coin phone analogy is just perfect. I mean, a multi-million-dollar business that was disrupted. So you saw the decline in your coin phone revenue, or even actually in your coin phone unit, your coin phones itself. So if you weren't aware of that declining trend and understood that, oh, look, there's the wireless revenue, all of a sudden this wireless is growing. If you don't jump, if you're not willing to make the jump, then you really are going to lose your job. And the biggest factor is you need to change. If you're not willing to change and disrupt yourself, you're at risk of really losing your job and being left behind. But I would see the technology such as, autonomous things, AI-driven development, meaning like we have smartphones now. Well, they're going to become smarter. AI, artificial intelligence is going to be into our smartphones, into the apps, smarter smartphones, in cloud to the edge. So you have all these Internet of Things. You all have these smart connected devices. Your Nest, your door, your refrigerator, everything, is controlled. Everything, Internet of Things, smart connected devices. Well, if we don't get cloud computing to the edge of this, if we don't get the cloud closer to these smart connected devices, we're going to have a lot of latency issues, and we'll be back to the way we were with modems and dial-up. So that's a big that's a big technology trend that's going on. And I would also say blockchain, and not so much the crypto, but the decentralized databases of what blockchain is bringing.
Yeah, and just if you could you explain both cloud computing and blockchain technology?
Yeah, so blockchain is decentralized digital database that's decentralized, where everyone can add to it. And there's three key questions. So basically, you have the whole client server model. That's the foundation of TCP/IP. So you have the client and you have the server. So where does it, and it's kind of a flawed architecture. And again, it's not for me to second guess or others to second guess. This is the way the technology was developed. But the data, our data, isn't with us. It's with the server. It's not with the client. So, and again, I don't nobody pays me for my data. It's out there. It's out there. Okay. When you go on Facebook, Facebook is spying for free. I always joke. I don't pay for Facebook, but if I'm on Facebook, it's spying for free because my data is going to the server. I don't have my data. Blockchain has the potential to change that model where the decentralization of the server will actually have our own data. We'll have our own data with the blockchains. So there's 3 key questions that you really need to ask if you're in business. What's going to be your new value proposition? How are you going to provide value to the customer in the blockchain environment? Do you make the blockchain public or private? And what incentives do you have to offer for people to join your blockchain, because there's going to be so many? And is it going to be a disruption to the Airbnb, to the Ubers of the world with this decentralized technology? The jury's out, but I'm fascinated to see what happens with it. And I'm not talking about the crypto. I know Facebook and Libra, but I'm really talking about the decentralized digitized database, decentralized digital database, which blockchain technology is. In terms of the cloud, well, with more storage, faster chip speed, cheaper storage, instead of everyone having their own data centers. And it's a fascinating story what Amazon did. Amazon had their own data center and they built it up. They built it up for the holiday rush. They always had, they had to make sure that everyone could access the Amazon, site. So their network utilization was probably like 99%, November, December, and this is years ago, everybody's at Amazon, their customers, and make sure, they're able to access the website. All of a sudden, come January, their network utilization, their servers in their data centers, probably 40% being used. The other ones are just going to shut off. They don't need them. But they had to size the data center for their largest capacity, which is November, December, holiday season. So Bezos and his team, they're like, oh, well, what can we do with this, extra data set, servers that we have? Oh, okay, well, let's lease it. And that's how Amazon Web Services came about. So, an online bookseller, which is what the original business model of Amazon was, what it turned into be. AWS is their, I know they don't publicly, cite their revenues, but AWS is their number one revenue profit maker. So I just find that an amazing story. So you have this cloud computing. I mean, the cloud is, they call it the cloud. Where is your service now? Well, they can be anywhere in the cloud. There's, companies don't have their own data, especially small companies. They don't have to have their own data center. And this actually, as you know, Frank, this was the whole, really enabled startups to occur, because back in my day, I had no chance to do a startup. I might have had an idea, but I needed servers, I needed power, I needed electricity, I needed space. Now you're at your computer, you go to AWS, credit card, get some AWS credits, and you can have your own company. So it's just been an amazing transformation, of cloud computing, which I'm fascinated about.
It's a very interesting field. By any chance, have you heard of the company Wasabi?
No, I haven't.
Their whole idea is to be a competitor to Amazon. And instead of, how Amazon expands, it sells consumer goods and stuff along those lines, as well as the web services. What Wasabi is trying to do is it's trying to focus on the data storage, and it saw a niche where Amazon's business model couldn't shift from doing both consumer end kind of dealings as well as the data services. So what they did was they made sure to specialize in their data services, and it allowed them to really make a lot of money. And they're really an up and coming kind of company. I recently heard about them from a startup podcast from UPenn, and it was very interesting to just hear about them.
Oh, great. I'll definitely look them up. Thank you. I'm learning something tonight. I appreciate it.
I'll link that down in the description for everybody as well. And I also just wanted to ask you, what are your hopes for the future of technology?
Personally, I think we have to look at the society impact. If we have these self-driving trucks, for example, what's going to happen to the 100,000 truck drivers? I think that we as a society need to understand that and care for that. And I'll go forward a little more. What happens if we have self-driving trucks? Well, we don't need the truck stops. Now, I've done a lot of driving on Route 80, Route 78, Pennsylvania, and they're very rural areas, and in those towns, well, the Love truck stop is the main source of income. The McDonald's, the Subway, the gas station. If we have self-driving trucks, not only will the truck drivers be disrupted, but also these rural towns. Now, it took basically 30 years for Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and that Lehigh Valley territory. I mean, Billy Joel wrote a song, Allentown, because the factories, went out of business, again, overseas, etc., the geopolitical concerns. But now, after 30 years, Amazon, Target, Walmart are actually, taking those spaces as their warehouse, because it's cheaper, to go down 78 into the city rather than have a warehouse in New York City. I mean, real estate alone. So it's just an amazing transformation, but it took 30 years for that to occur. So hopefully the societal impact of AI, of autonomous vehicles, of autonomous things, that we as a society care for those who have been disrupted. It was one thing when Easy Pass came along and there were no toll takers. Okay, I think the toll takers were transitioned into other jobs. But what do we do with over with the 100,000 truck drivers? And that's a concern for me.
So it seems that companies are focusing more on the masses of people to be able to market their products and make it easier for those people, but at the cost of ruining the livelihood, so to speak, of many people living in rural America.
Yeah. Again, that's my concern. I use the self-driving trucks, for example. I mean, look, Frank, look what happened close to home here. The yellow cabs in New York City. Okay, people come to this country and they save up enough money and they get the taxi medallion, New York City taxi medallion, and they work. They work 24 hours, again, 7 days a week, and those medallions were worth a lot of money because there's a limited number. So those medallions were worth close to $1 million. They were $750,000, $800,000, and people, got loans, and those medallions appreciated. But once you paid off that medallion, then all the money you're making driving that New York City cab is yours. So all of a sudden, technology comes along, and okay, we have the sharing economy, and okay, well, we can do Uber, Lyft, etc., Juno, and those taxi cab medallions are now worth 100,000, not less. And unfortunately, it's in the paper. Even last summer, we had 3 or 4 people actually commit suicide in front of New York City Hall. Because it again, you're holding on to this medallion that you owe $500,000 on, and it's worth $75,000. So what do we do? It's easy to transition from a yellow taxi cab driver to an Uber driver, and many do that. But what do you do with that medallion that you still owe the bank on? You still owe the bank a $500,000 loan, and now you're not getting any fares because everybody's an Uber. So your medallion, and so that impact, on society. We need to care for that. I don't have the answer for that, but it's real. And so those who are left behind, what do we do?
And I actually 2 more questions, because it seems that most of your modern tech companies have really been affecting Americans who are just coming into the country, and as well as just people who have been living here for generations. And I'd also like to broaden that question to, how do you think technology is affecting countries that are developing?
I think global innovation is here, and it's a key. Innovation used to occur only in the developed countries and then transition to the developing countries, and sometimes it always wouldn't work. There's a famous example of the Ford Motor Company sending a Ford vehicle to India, and they thought, by making the car cheaper, they took out the power windows in the rear. Little did they know, because they didn't understand the culture or the demographics of India, those in India who could afford a Ford vehicle generally had a chauffeur. So the chauffeur had the power windows and the family in the back had no power windows. So that is a classic example of, what Ford in Detroit thought was best for India. That paradigm has changed where innovation now occurs globally, in developing countries. It can occur anywhere. So I'm really happy about that. And that really, I have students from India and China who, go back to India and China and are just doing so well back home, starting businesses, working for companies. GeoMobile, for example, has just transformed India. So I'm glad the innovation is occurring on a global level, no longer innovation occurring in the developed country then sent to the developing country. That's all changed.
There's also a dark side to this. I think it's more so the grounded companies here in America. Like you could say Facebook has basically incited a genocide in Southeastern Asia between a group of Muslims and the Buddhist population there. And there's a dark side to these technologies. What are some of the unforeseen dark sides that you see occurring that might be occurring in these emerging economies, or that may occur as we continue to move technologically forward?
Yeah, Frank, I'll bring it to a higher level. Cybersecurity. Again, our power grid in this country is very antiquated, and it's again the blackouts that occurred, recently in New York City.
Yes.
I feel that's very vulnerable to cyber attacks, and again, I think that's really in my own opinion, that's the dark side of the technology. These cyber attacks, cyber security. And so again, I mean, look what's going on in smaller governments, smaller towns. So let's just take it at a local level. You have hackers, like in Baltimore, for example. It's even larger than that. Baltimore, last month, the hackers got into Baltimore, shut down all their computer systems, and said, if you want your data, give us 100,000 million Bitcoin. And they're all said, I'm not laughing to laugh. It happened in Baltimore, but it's happening in a lot of small towns that you go in, you just take control of everything, these systems in towns, and say, okay, here's the ransom. That's occurring now. And so what's going to happen at a larger level? Is someone going to take down our whole power grid, which is very antiquated? We have not modernized our power grid. Yes, we've modernized the smart home, but we haven't modernized the actual grid, our power grid. So I think that's a big vulnerability. And I know Con Ed is really big on cybersecurity. They have a big cybersecurity department, and they're working on that. But a lot of these small towns don't have the technology expertise. And all of a sudden, you send them an email, they click on the link, and all of a sudden, boom, you're done. So I think that's the dark side, in my opinion. And also cyber from a global level. Look what happened today, the front page of the New York Times. Russia hacked into all 50 states election systems, electoral systems, all 50 states. That's on the front page of today's New York Times. So, that's what I consider the dark side of the technology.
Right. First off, guys, don't get any ideas. Please do not hold your town for ransom. I know it might seem fun, but don't, please. Second, as a teacher, you have a very important role to play in developing students who will be moving on into this more and more technology-based world. I really want to start with, what was that shift like for you, moving from Verizon, or maybe not necessarily moving fully, or kind of, like I like to say, shifting gears, so to speak, from going from Verizon to becoming a teacher? What was that experience like for you?
Sure. Again, it was by accident. Similar to what happened in '87 when I read this newspaper ad and said, okay, let me apply to this New York Telephone to be a telephone operator. What happened was I graduated with my MBA in 2010 from NYU Tandon. We had an MBA, a really good MBA program there. And when I graduated in May, about 2 weeks later, I was actually working in West Virginia. And I was all done with school. And so now I was really, again, I managed, to answer your previous question, I always try to manage my projects and my travel according to school. So once I graduated in May, I really was, really going on the road to to my sites and scheduled my cutovers that way. It's really how to manage yourself. So I was in West Virginia and I got a phone call from the department chairperson, and I thought something happened with my degree or something. But he said, no, he said, we need someone to teach this global innovation course. He had taught it. He wasn't going to teach it in the summer. There's a lot of full-time faculty who like to spend the summer doing their research, etc. But there is a need for teachers of courses. So I said, I don't know if I can really teach. And he said, no, I think you can, Setra. Why don't you just try it? So I ended up in the summer of 2010, teaching global innovation course, and kind of fell into it by accident and said, okay, I'm not the best, but I'm not the worst. And they keep asking me to teach. So I would teach, and all of a sudden September, hey, can you teach on Saturday? So I was the Saturday. I taught the 2 classes on Saturday. The way NYU works, they still have the Saturday courses. It's every other weekend, 8 Saturdays, 8:30 to 1, then 1:30 to 6. So I was the Saturday person. I'd go in every other Saturday and teach my 2 courses. And then again, just by fate, coincidence, I was reassigned. I was assigned to Florida, which was always my dream, and they knew it. And so I cashed in a lot of favors. And in 2000, oh my goodness, 5 years ago. So it was 2014, 2014. I was transferred down here to Florida to work full time, permanently. I always traveled to Florida. It was again part of the GT territory, and right around the end of 2015, I said, I have 29 years. I'm okay. I became, I went from the kid to being the old guy, but nobody forced me out. I still had, I think I had a few more years left, was going to work on 5G. And I said, you know what, I think 29 years is enough. And I was very, I grew up very poor, and, Verizon, I was able to save my money, etc. Verizon treated me very, very well. And so I said, okay, kids are off the payroll, everything's fine. Why don't I just, I'm here. This was always my dream. Let me just retire early, but I'm okay. And maybe I'll go work at the public supermarket, full circle, maybe. And then I got a call from the department saying, our enrollment is booming, because it really became NYU Tandon. And there's nothing wrong with Poly. I'm a Poly graduate also, but when they put NYU, in place of Polytechnic University, the NYU brand really, students just really, are drawn to it, and our enrollment is actually just incredible. And so they said, do you want to work full time? And I was like, and this was literally a week after I had given my notice that, hey, I'm going to end on, April 1st of 2016. I'm going to just retire. I gave 4, 5, 6 months notice. And then all of a sudden, a week later, I get a phone call from the department. I was an adjunct. I was still flying up every other Saturday to teach. I would fly up from Tampa, up to JFK and teach, and then fly back, Saturday night, no problem. Or I come up Friday night, teach Saturday morning. And they said, you want to come on full time? And I was like, okay. So I'm actually now, full-time faculty with the title of lecturer in the department. And so I compromised. I spend the fall up in New York, and generally in the February through August, I'm here in Florida, and I can go up and back, and I do a lot of online also. So it was, again, an accidental transition, but I really wanted to give back. I teach undergrad, grad, and online. I just really want to give back, because I was very, very lucky for the career I had. Again, starting out at 18 years old to where I am now. I'm very blessed, or very lucky, very fortunate. So I just want to give back. That's what I'm doing right now. I want to help people succeed, and that's really all I'm doing it for. I don't know for how much longer I'll do it, but right now I'm happy doing it.
That's really wonderful to hear. You've had a lot of just amazing experiences in your life, and I'm guessing this teaching experience has to be one of them. How would you say it's changed you, moving from Verizon to now moving to teaching? What was it? How did it change you, so to speak? Did it change anything you had learned at Verizon? Did it make you realize something different about yourself, realize something different about the world?
Yeah, it was a big transition for me, quite candidly, because as an adjunct, from 2010 right up to January 2016, I was teaching grad school. So grad school, is a different demographic than undergrads. A lot of the grad students also are working professionals, like I was, going to school nights and weekends. But as full-time faculty, I think it's responsibility also to teach undergrad. And I teach last fall, I had 68 sophomores, 58 juniors. This semester, I have the same numbers. So my sophomores will be juniors, and I call them mine because I really do care about them. But I needed to understand, at Verizon, I was dealing with adults, peers. And I've learned to be a little bit more sensitive to my undergrads. If you go on ratemyprofessor.com, they hate me, love me, but I tended to be a little bit too condescending, not deliberately. It was just that I was so ingrained at Verizon that I forget who my audience is, and I need to be a little bit more sensitive to my undergrad demographic. Not baby them, but just understand the audience, that I'm not dealing with a 40-year-old person, or I'm not speaking to someone 45 years old. I'm speaking to 19-year-olds, folks who don't have the same life experience yet. So that was a big, very candidly, and I was it took me a while to adapt a little to that. Some people will get it, but I think I tend to be a little bit too, I don't know my audience, and it can come across condescending where I don't mean it. And I'm fine. I mean, I'm okay. The majority of my undergrads are okay, but I need to understand who my audience is, and so my sophomores and juniors, I do understand them much, much better.
Have any come back to you, or just have any done something that just amazed you, like you didn't think that was possible from this kid who just is attending university?
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you all of them. I'm just so proud of everyone. I mean, again, 60, 70, 130 last fall. I go on LinkedIn. I try to congratulate everyone. I mean, just the progress. My first undergraduate class, I'll tell you a quick story, and I hope I'm not babbling, but last fall, I had two students come up to me right at the beginning of the semester. They were my sophomores. They were my juniors, who are now, going to be seniors. And so they were in my class last fall. They were juniors. I knew them from sophomore year. And the two said, we want to start the student club called Women in Business and Entrepreneurship. Would you be our faculty advisor? Now, again, in the School of Engineering, we need to be a little bit more diverse with our faculty, and we're getting there. Again, from a student standpoint, we are 44% of our incoming freshman class is female. We need to, quite candidly, make that percentage part of the faculty. So I said, I'd be glad to do it. What do you need? Oh, well, we want to do a career panel. Can you reach out to the graduates, alumni? So I went back to my first class in 2016, and I sent a note out. I got the LinkedIn connections, who was local, and I sent it out to 5, and all 5 immediately responded that they were happy to come back, etc. And I had only known them one semester because they were graduating. I saw them the spring semester of 2016, and they were graduates of 2016. So I only had them for 15 weeks. And they all 5 came back, and it's just been such a pleasure and such an honor to see that growth of my sophomores, my juniors, who now gone out into industry. Some have gone academic, some are going PhD tracks also. And so it really blesses my heart, and warms my heart, not to sound corny, that I see that accomplishment. Everyone's a success in whatever they do. And so I love looking, now I'm not the kid anymore, but I like to see the accomplishments, and I'm so proud. And I just try to add a little, value to their program of studies.
I think that really does speak to what you said initially, that it's really, you've got to listen, you've got to be kind, and you've got to understand people that you said helped you move forward in Verizon. I think that, again, this just really proves your point that it helps wherever you are. And I know this is kind of off topic, but you had mentioned their studies. Could you maybe go into a little bit more detail about the program that you are participating in, what you teach, what is the material that's covered?
Sure. Well, again, at the New York University Tandon School of Engineering, I'm in the Department of Technology Management and Innovation, and that's comprised of three subheadings. Our undergraduate is Business Technology Management. Our graduate, we have two graduate programs. One is Management Technology, and our industrial engineering program is the second graduate program. So there's three programs, undergraduate, two graduate programs within our department. Industrial engineering and management technology graduate programs can also be done online. Our undergraduate in Tandon, I think we need to move a little fast with online. There's been some debate, which is above my pay grade. I know City University of New York has a whole information systems in their School of Professional Studies completely online. And I think we've fallen behind that in our undergraduate at Tandon. Again, it may be tough to do mechanical engineering from an undergrad standpoint online, but maybe we give it a try. But if City University of New York School of Professional Studies has a whole undergrad major, 128 credits completely online, I think Tandon needs to look at that also. Again, it benefits the non-traditional students. That's my point. We have the technology. Let's enable that technology for all. And so if we're doing it at a graduate level, let's do it at an undergraduate level too. So those are the three programs. Again, from an undergraduate standpoint, business technology management is business technology management, where, okay, well, what's the difference between your program and Stern? I think the program, the differentiate is you have the technology also. You're in a school of engineering and learning, it's a big joke, how to manage the engineers, and that's kind of there goes my condescending. But you're learning the technology, but you're also learning how to manage the technology. So you learn about how to code, but you'll also learn about management. And so I think that's the differentiator between our program and others. And then at the graduate level, management technology has been around, for over 35, 40 years. And industrial engineering, again, industrial engineering is, how do you make those, how are you going to make those supply chains smarter? With blockchain. That's going to be amazing. Proof of concept. How do you, digital twins, for example, in industry, in production lines, manufacturing, you're going to actually have a digital twin, a prototype, which is actually going to be the real time. So that's going to reduce the quality defects. So I think industrial engineering is fascinating, where the technology is going with that.
Right. What is this digital twin you're speaking of? I'm sorry, I'm just not familiar with myself.
So digital twin, you can look it up. You all can look it up. The digital twin is with the technology now in manufacturing. You can actually create a prototype, which is exactly the same as your manufacturing facility. The big takeaway is when you had a lab, when it would work in the lab, but it would never work when you implemented it in real time. Like, so it would work in the lab, and then I would go to 38th Street, put in the switch, and it would bring down the switch, but it worked in the lab. With digital twins, the digital technology will allow you to have the same exact prototype, and it would be more of a proactive rather than a reactive when you're doing your manufacturing. It's up and coming. It's an emerging technology, but for industrial engineers, that's a key aspect of what you want to be involved in. If you want to know where the jobs are in industrial engineering, learn more about digital twins.
I see. And just to, as an amazing skill just for industrial engineers, now I'd like to maybe broaden the scope a little bit and say, what would you say it would be the most important to anyone, be it an engineer, be it a business person, just someone who wants to learn about technology? Like, what would you say is the most essential class for them to take, or maybe just the most essential skill they should have as we move forward?
I think the most essential skill is being a continuous learner. And I'll promote 3 different items that you need in your toolbox. First week of every June, you have to listen and read Mary Meeker's Internet Trends. Mary Meeker is industry standard in technology. She's been doing Internet Trends for 23 years, and I'm not saying that. The New York Times, do a search on Mary Meeker, New York Times. New York Times has said Mary Meeker is, industry standard, her technology trends. So every year, every June, first week of June, get yourself and learn what the current trends are, technology trends, and they're global. And Mary Meeker is just wonderful. So know who Mary Meeker is. Take a step back. Every March, MIT Technology Review, the 10 breakthrough innovations, and they're just fascinating. And actually, the guest editor for the MIT Technology Review Emerging Innovations this year, they never had a guest editor, was Bill Gates. So those 10 trends are just absolutely wonderful. And like, for example, Waymo, what Google is doing with Waymo and the algorithm of self-driving cars, that was one of the 10 breakthrough technologies 4 years ago. So again, getting to understand the trends and knowing them and getting ahead of them professionally and personally, you'll have a competitive advantage over others. The last thing, at the end of October, mid-October, Gartner. Now, Gartner and Forrester Research are the leading, industry business research companies, corporations. I know Verizon pays a lot of money for this research that analysts do, business research. So again, mid-October, Gartner comes out with the top 10 strategic technology trends for 2020. This is going to happen in October. So I teach all three in my classes to get that exposure, to understand, because right now, what are the hot items? Data analysis, data visualization. Okay, but 5 years, it's going to be something else. So you could be the greatest, data visualization person, but 5 years from now, something else is going to come along. Again, I grew up in the wireline. I was like the best modem, Hayes modem configure, around. Well, guess what? There's no more modems. The modems I installed, I actually ripped out. It was all, it's understanding. Or what was the next? Well, do you want to learn the Cisco? Do you want to be CCNP? You want to learn Cisco's? A lot of people said, no. I like the modems. Well, you don't have a job. So you have to be a continuous learning. You have to be willing to learn and take advantage of those situations. And quite honestly, that's how I survived at Verizon, just always wanting to learn, and they're willing. A lot of people aren't willing to learn. I'm just, I'm happy what I'm doing, but that technology is going to change and disrupt you, and that's where you're going to be in trouble. There's very little, I know COBOL, I know Fortran. That's what I learned in undergrad, but that was 25 years ago. There's really not a need for Fortran and COBOL, anymore. So you have to, again, I just can't stress that enough. No matter where you are in life, and don't be, how can I say this? Be comfortable being uncomfortable.
So you gotta, so to speak, break out of your comfort zone to really be able to move forward.
Yeah, again, Frank, the modem example is perfect. Oh, I was great modem. I can install these modems. I can configure them, TTY, 2400, 9600 baud modems, make them communicate, set up the modems. Okay, tell me where I'm going to get a job in 2019 configuring modems. And I was really good at it, and I was doing really well. Got, with all your, bonuses, raises. Well, I would, then all of a sudden you say in this new technology, Wellfleet routers, Cisco routers comes along, and networking and IP, etc. You have to understand, and they were willing, they said, do you want to learn this? I said, of course. But some people, my peers, like, no, I just, I don't want to, I'm good with the modems. And then when layoffs occur, because as Verizon transitioned from wireline to wireless and more revenue in wireless, well, you need less people in wireline, more people in wireless. So if you weren't willing to make that transition, you lost your job, basically. A lot of people lost their jobs, and you feel bad, but you don't lose that much sleep at night if that person wasn't willing and had every opportunity to learn the new technology and refused. So you gotta change. And I don't, again, data visualization, this technology we're talking about tonight, 5 years from now, it's going to be different. 10 years from now, it's going to be something different.
On the topic of just continual learning, are there any courses like open courseware or anything you could recommend? Or would you say that it's just really best to find what you enjoy and just kind of explore that?
Find what you enjoy. I know it's Linda's out there, edX. There's so many. Just find something that you're comfortable with, and just do it. That's the thing. Making the time. I always say, again, short-term sacrifice, long-term gain. I missed a lot of parties growing up. I missed a lot of my friends' stuff. I didn't miss weddings or anything like that, but I would have liked to play golf instead of going to Brooklyn on Saturdays. But guess what? I can play a lot of golf now, and my friends who are my friends are still my friends, and not that I'm any different. I mean, they went to school, etc. But there were, I missed some parties, but now I'm making up for lost time. But it really is about short-term sacrifice, long-term gain. That was always my mantra as I was moving forward.
Definitely, it's a good mantra, because you see all these successful people nowadays, and that's the only way to really make it forward. And I'd actually like to ask you this question, and if you haven't given it some thought, I'd really love to just hear what you kind of think of on the spot. But you had a lot of experience, and if you could boil down everything you've learned over your career, or if you wanted to, you could create whatever course you wanted to. It didn't have to be engineering, didn't have to be business, didn't have to be anything. What would you say you'd want to create?
I would create a course, interpersonal skills. It's not a cliche. Don't burn bridges. I hope I can just tell this one story. Again, I was probably 22 years old, 23 years old, and I had to go up to Oneonta, New York, because I was doing some training on this new system that we were putting in. I think it was like the first computer-based system, CBT, computer-based training, we used to call it. And it was a snowstorm, and I was down county, down in downstate New York, and I didn't know any better. I got in my car and drove up Route 17 to Oneonta, hit Route 88, etc. I was lucky because there was like a New York State snowplow in front of me. I got to the Holiday Inn in Oneonta, and I walked in, and at the bar, when I went to the front desk, at the bar was like a lot of 9X people at the time at the bar who were staying overnight for the training. Well, the manager, and I won't name her, but she was the manager of the Oneonta office. She could not believe that I showed up. She didn't think it was going to happen, the snow, etc. And it was, I probably was young and stupid, but it wasn't a big deal. I showed up. We did the training the next day because I was the only one from out of town. Everybody else was from the local Oneonta, Elmira area, basically Binghamton. She never forgot that. Well, she became a executive director of an organization, and she always remembered that and took care of me. Like, I always performed, but she always made sure. And she's the one who got me to Florida. She knew that I wanted to go to Florida. So my point is, always treat people the way you want to be treated, because if you burn bridges, and again, that was, I'm talking 30 years later, and in 2015, she always remembered what I did. And I didn't report to her directly for many, many years, etc. But she always made sure that, that when I did something or was involved in something, she always supported me. And so just, again, always thank people, be kind to people, treat people with respect. And you'll go a long way with that. You really, people say, oh, I was too nice or something. People would say that at the beginning, oh, you're too nice. And I wasn't looking for brownie points or anything. I just was very fortunate, very happy to be in a company and getting a paycheck. And that would be the course I would take, just interpersonal skills, how to treat people, how to conduct with people. I think sometimes with social media, and you might be a little bit closer to it than I am, the whole the discourse that we have sometimes on Twitter and on Facebook. It's just sometimes kind of sad. I never had that in high school, Frank, but I see my, people I went to high school with, they're on Facebook just going back and forth. And I'm like, darn, I'm glad we didn't do this in high school. So I think we just need to, especially in companies, treat people the way you want to be treated. So hope I didn't babble too much on that.
No, it was a really great point you made. And
look, Frank, can I interrupt you?
Yeah, go for it. What's up?
All right. So let's talk about how we met. Okay. And it's nothing, but it goes along the same lines. You came for an open house. I wasn't doing anything that, day. You know what I'm saying? You came in on a Saturday, right? The Saturday, etc. So I
Yeah.
said, well, let me show you around. I'm not, I didn't have class actually because it was every other Saturday. So they made the open house when we don't have class. So, I showed you around. I gave you like the tour. It wasn't a big deal. To me, I was like, yeah, let me, if you're willing to, I'll be glad to show you around. There's no, I'm nowhere to, I'll be glad to. And that's how, and how many years ago was that? 2, 3?
Yeah, I think it was like 2 now.
2 years, right? So that, again, that kind of accidental encounter where you were just one of many who would just come through the open house, and you were like, and I don't know really the genesis, but I just like, yeah, you want me to show you around? Yeah, let me show you. I can show you this, the Makerspace Lab, blah blah blah. Just give you the 5-cent tour. But look at us now. Here we are. And I think that says a lot to, that's my analogy. That, I'm using the old Verizon one, but I think you and I, there's another analogy with that. If you weren't willing to, take the tour, and like I said, I just gave you the 5-cent tour, and we've been friends, ever since.
Yeah, honestly, like, I think it's moments like that where you meet someone who's just being, you have to be willing to be kind to really be able to build a friendship and to be able to build very positive relationships with people. And I think that just having had done that has just positively affected my life in so many ways. And I hope that I can have had the same influence on you. I think it's just this value of being good, trying to be the best you can be and bring the best that you can to everyone you meet is just, it can't steer you wrong.
Right. Yeah. Now, again, if there's students listening, I'm not a pushover. I mean, you got to hand in your homework. You got to do your assignments. There's an accountability aspect of school. You got to show up. You got to, even at work, you got to show up. And, if you're going to be, somewhere, you got to be there. If you're going to be in class, you got to be to class. If you got the homework is due. So, don't take advantage of the niceness. Unfortunately, you get the grade you earn. I wish everybody starts with an A, and I wish everyone got it, could get an A. But again, everybody starts on an equal path. If you're not handing in assignments and you're kind of slacking off, New York City, and you'll discover this in Philadelphia, there's a lot of things that you want to explore. You'll have time for that, but don't lose focus on your studies. No matter how nice the professor is, there's an obligation, you get the grade you earn. So I just wanted to clarify that also.
Yeah, no problem with that. That's definitely a good thing. You can turn a very nice teacher into a person who's going to be the poker in the fire.
I really I do this. Instead of playing golf, I want to teach. I wanted to give back. So again, I want everyone to succeed, but you also have to meet me halfway. You have to hand in the assignments. You have to, come to class, etc. There's deliverables that have to be met, and so I just, I don't enjoy giving the, the B's and the C's, but you get the grade you earn, and there's really never been any kind of pushback because, we document everything and, well, you missed this, and this, if there's trouble, then of course there's always resources, NYU and I know Penn, there's always, resources available. But if you just want to, play Fortnite all day and all night, it's going to happen. So yes, be nice and be kind, but there's also an accountability aspect in school as well.
Definitely, you really want to make sure you're not enjoying the kindness and not pushing yourself to be the best.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Hey, this is all good, and I think that this is going to be our the final question that I always ask on all of my podcast interviews, and I think I'm excited to hear your answer on this, but how would you define personal success?
Happiness. Yeah. If you're happy doing what you're doing, yeah, that's personal success. If you're happy. If you're unhappy doing something, that's not personal success. If you're happy doing something, if you're not, change. And you can always change. You can. No matter what your situation is. Trust me. I take that from personal experience. I come from a large family. I think my brothers are all happy. We all do different things. For the most part, we get along, but I think everyone's happy and we all do different things. I have a brother who's an auto mechanic. I have a brother who's an online journalist. I have a brother who works in Marshalls. I have a brother who does construction. And everyone's happy. I'm happy. They're happy. So that's how I would define personal success. Not about money. You can have all the money in the world and be, miserable. Look at this guy Epstein. He's in prison right now, a millionaire, whatever the situation. You know what I'm saying? Money doesn't buy happiness. I think personal success is happiness. I hope that's a sufficient answer for you.
I think that was a fantastic answer. It's everyone's always put it their own twist on it, but you really you gave your answer in the most pure form it could be given, I guess. Because a lot of people usually will say something along those lines, but they'll be a little bit more verbose about it. And I have to say that was one of the just loveliest answers I've heard to that question. And I really want to say thank you for coming on the show tonight. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you and be able to share your experiences with everybody listening.
Thank you, Frank. It was an honor. I know we'll keep going, and I'll see you soon.
Most definitely.
And to all you listeners out there, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, all of the things we discussed will have additional material you can find in the description. And if you want to watch another episode, just click the channel name and you'll be able to see all of them. If you'd like to check out our social media, we have an Instagram where we post daily motivational quotes as well as little tidbits of knowledge. The tag is @TheRealPrimarySource. Thank you again and have a wonderful night.